Welcome to the world beyond belief. Our held beliefs are the only things that limit what's possible. Conversely, beliefs are the very things which allow us to expand our possibilities. It's the premise of these podcasts that by examining our beliefs and seeing them for what they are, they're simply beliefs, it's possible for us to change our lives for the better. So the purpose of the world beyond belief is to examine beliefs, not to prove them right or wrong, but to look at their effects on your individual life and also on our collective consciousness. Hello, welcome to the world beyond belief. My name is Paul Marko, and I'll be your host for this hour-long podcast. Joining me tonight is my co-host, producer, color commentator, Mindy Erkin.
Hello.
Today we're going to talk about tipping points. I don't know how many of you remember the Malcolm Gladwell book that was published around the year 2000 that talked about this phenomenon of the tipping point. Well, I'm sure you all know what the tipping point is, but just let me reinforce the exact notion of the tipping point. And I love to do this because I'm a guy who likes to lean back on his chair. I've always done this all my life, and I've always been soundly criticized for it. And now it's come in handy. It can help me illustrate a point. When I'm tipping back in my chair, as long as my weight is on the back legs of the chair, I'm cool and I can rock back and forth. But then when I reach the tipping point, where the weight of my back on the back of the chair is no longer going down through the back legs, I fall right on my back. And so I've tipped over, I've reached the tipping point, and I've gone kaboom. Now, that phenomenon happens in society too. Certain things start off, a few people are doing them, and then more and more people start doing them, and all of a sudden it reaches a tipping point so that, it's okay for everybody to do, or everybody's doing it. We were talking earlier about the iPhone, or not so much the iPhone, but the cell phone. It used to be rare that someone would have a cell phone, but now apparently it's reached a tipping point somewhere where now, everybody has a cell phone.
Well, you have to. There's no payphones anymore.
Right. Well, in addition to the fact that there's no payphones, it's gotten to be popular. I also think of the idea of women wearing pants. I can remember early in my life, it was kind of risque, or actually it was low class.
Really?
For women to wear pants. They had to wear skirts or dresses, and then after a while, more and more people started doing it, loosened up, and they hit the tipping point. Everybody did it. Another thing I noticed, and this is from an old man's standpoint too, I can remember when I was growing up, the people that used to have trucks were farmers, or people that lived out in the country. If you lived in the city, you didn't have a truck. You had a car. Maybe you had a two-seater, maybe you had a four-seater, but you had a car. And then I can remember, I was probably toward the late 70s or early 80s, there was just this massive proliferation of trucks on the road. And it became okay for everybody to have a truck. They were so useful. So it got to be everybody had a truck. Well, anyway, we were also talking about organic food. It used to be just some of us crazies would be craving organic food. We'd want to, limit our diet to eating organic food. Now there's a whole lot of people. There's even stores that cater to this group of organic food people.
So I guess what happens is you get to a point where you reach a critical mass, a critical number of people where it tips over the line from just a few to become acceptable and the norm.
Right. Everybody sees the wisdom in it, and all of a sudden it tips. There was a major worldwide tipping point that happened regarding the Syrian conflict. The elites, as they usually do, had set up a false flag incident. You know, that was the one where the chemical agent was released, and they were painting Assad as the horrible person that they would like him to be in the eyes of the public, and they were marching toward war in Syria. But a sufficient number of people were awake to the tactics that were always used by the elite to take them into war. And they said no. They said no to David Cameron when he presented it to the UK Parliament. And overwhelming majority of people in the United States weren't in favor of that war. Matter of fact, some polls showed only 9% were in favor of that war. So I think for sure we reached the tipping point there. So I think tipping points are true and they really happen. And the reason I'm bringing it up today is because I think that most people think that we're going to reach a tipping point in consciousness evolution where we all wake up and spontaneously become aware of what's happening to us. And because our consciousness has shifted to such a degree, we no longer put up with it. Well, I really hope that's true. But being a psychologist and working with people all my life, I suggest something's going to happen first. I suggest that human beings and human consciousness is going to reach a certain, what I'm going to call a flash point before that happens, where our basic instincts and our basic animal man or woman comes out. Because after all, you know, as human beings, we're not like declawed kittens, afraid of the dog or trying to keep ourselves out of the way of trouble. Quite frankly, we're lions. And we have the basic instincts and the strength to really do some major things. I think that's going to happen first before this spontaneous enlightenment happens. I see this happening for two reasons. One is because I've seen naturally in my own work as a psychologist this instinct coming out, and that's what we're going to talk about for the bulk of this podcast. The other reason is because I think that this is what the elites are planning for. I think they're setting up the FEMA camps. I think they're putting the surveillance grid in place. I think they're buying massive amounts of ammunition and vehicles to watch for this flashing point. I think this is the thing they're afraid of. Okay, let me try to characterize the pickle that we're really in. Most of the population on the planet is asleep. They have no idea that they're being controlled. They have no idea that this whole trap that's planned for them. People in the United States who should probably be most awake are really most asleep. And I blame that squarely on TV. Here, the elite has an incredible instrument that's able to hypnotize people within 3 seconds and then feed them whatever belief system they want to feed them. The overwhelming bulk of the population is sound asleep. However, we do have people waking up. We have several million that have a glimpse of what's going on. They have a notion of what's going on. They're not totally resistant to opening their eyes. And we probably have 1 million or more people that are totally awake, know what's going on, and are able to formulate actions to save themselves. Now, the way I see us coming out of this, there's like 3 scenarios in my mind. One is, of course, the scenario that we talked about before, was the idyllic thing where we can sit here, we can reach a higher level of consciousness where we can see all of these plans and all this paperwork that's put in place as folly and just turn our backs on it and ignore it and walk away. That would be, to me, the ideal scenario. Another great scenario would be an outside force, an extraterrestrial force will come in and with some high technology and perhaps level the playing field with the elite so that we have the technology that they have and we're able to evolve consciousness perhaps under the direction or at least under the help of some external force. I don't think we should be waiting around for that. I think that what really is going to happen, and we need to orchestrate it, we need to plan for it, we need to be ready for it, is that the shift of consciousness will begin to happen, but it'll happen after this flashpoint. And I see this flashpoint occurring when we realize that we have nowhere else to turn. We realize that we are fighting an uphill battle. It's no longer fun and games. It's no longer latte and sweets in the afternoon. We have to fight to save ourselves, our progeny, and we start identifying with the rest of the people in the world and get active. I'm not advocating violence, because violence in this war will be met with more violence than we can even imagine. It's the hatred and the fear that actually propels the monsters that are sitting on our chests. So we need to be thoughtful. When the flashpoint occurs, we need to do things calmly, we need to do things smoothly, and we need to do things that'll really work. And I've got some of those things. I'm going to talk about them at the end of this video. Let me tell you why I think we're a lion and we're not a pussycat, a declawed pussycat. I've been working with people for a long time, and I started using a system to help people understand one another that was brought into play by a man named Brian Oshry. Now, this guy envisioned human beings as kind of aligning with three different belief patterns. There's the uppers, there's the middles, and there's the lowers. And here's how the belief patterns seem to play out. The uppers feel like they're entitled to things. They feel like they have a better education, they're smarter. They certainly deserve to be in this category. And they're like the bosses. They're the rulers because they need to be, because it's part of the role they play in society. The middles, I don't want to characterize much because they're kind of an embarrassing group. They're sycophants. They want to please the uppers because they certainly don't want to end up in the lowers. These people are powerless. They go from one group, from the uppers, oh yes sir, what can I do, to the lowers. Make sure I'm not considered a lower. Now, Brian had a really cool way that he did his workshops. He would do his workshops on Cape Cod, and he would invite, now this is all about organizational development. This is all about teaching people to get along with one another in organizations. So to show the different positions that people had in organizations, he would have his workshops on Cape Cod and invite them all to show up on a certain date, but he would house the different categories, uppers, middles, and lowers, very, very differently.